Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me here as one of the artists and one of the speakers. I brought a few things with me to have it a bit like experiential, and I'm just gonna there's two floating around, and I'm gonna. Does anybody know what this is? Speculum, yay, well done. Speculum is like a tool of oppression, I guess some people say, because it was invented by a father of gynecology who tested it on slaves. We don't know the names of the slaves, so many bodies sacrificed for this, tool, which isn't comfortable and it isn't female friendly. It's not about, not being in pain. It's more about just like seeing what's in your vagina. So feel free to play with it. I'm sure you're gonna have fun. So there's a few floating around. And also, before I start, I wanted to just give you this very, not good-looking copy of the magazine that I'm going to mention in the presentation. Please remind me if I'm running out of time also, because I do have this tendency to talk too much. So before I start, there's one thing that I would like to mention. Whenever a person does kind of work related to health inequalities, social justice, I think it's always important to sort of recognize my position and my limitations within all of that. And this is to say that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the endometriosis and chronic illness community. These people have supported me throughout like all the years of my suffering, and it is a community work to get someone who is chronically ill and disabled for them to be here. So I own it to lots of victims and survivors of endoviolence. And this is a Barbie with endometriosis sitting on a uterus. Just something like when I played around with AI, I created that. Okay, so who am I? Who am I? Oh my God, this is such a question, right? I am a researcher, primarily. I have worked for a number of years as a researcher looking at digital justice and digital inequalities. I suffer from endometriosis. I have always had extremely heavy periods, and I have always been told that I need to get pregnant to get myself fixed, these type of narratives. My artistic work kind of has always been grounded in community work. So with it, what I do, I try to ensure that people are included in a meaningful way, and therefore the magazine that you can see around, but I'm gonna go into details later. I'm from Eastern Europe, so I was born in Poland and I moved to Scotland when I was 19. I lived there for years. I experienced lots of medical trauma there, and then I moved to Berlin a few years ago. And the healthcare here has been surprisingly amazing so far, so that's good news. So I try to connect different themes in my work: research, activism, art, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if there's at some point I get maybe too theoretical here, please let me know, and I will try to ground myself a little bit. So endometriosis. Do you know what endometriosis is? Anybody here who knows what endometriosis is? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so a few people, that's amazing. Endometriosis is one of those conditions that is informed by centuries of medical misogyny, ignorance, and just gaslighting of like entire female population by saying your period pain is normal, you should suffer and shut up, okay? And the entire work that I've been doing around gender health gap and gender pain gap is specifically focusing on these topics. So the corner over there, if you had a chance to, move around my artworks, the topic of pain and gynecological violence is covered there in many different ways. So endometriosis is a medical condition where the lining, so tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. It can be found anywhere in your body. It's 1 in 7 people who were assigned as female at birth can have endometriosis, but very often it takes 10 years of being told your pain is normal, you should just have a hot shower. You should, you know, all of these things. So it's a systemic issue because there hasn't been any research. There's very limited research. Nobody knows where it comes from, and nobody knows how to fully cure it. There's no cure for endometriosis as it is. It affects many things: access to healthcare, your everyday living, you know, pain levels, stigma, and awareness, because we don't often talk about periods. And if we do, we, you know, use blue liquid as we do in the ads around period. So my work, I'm going to quickly go over some of the work that I've done so far, and then I'm going to, you know, just kind of try to tie it into the community aspect. Gendered pain was one of the kind of like, yeah, I guess it was like my first exhibition in a sense, because prior to that, I was primarily working with communities in participatory arts. So I would never allow myself to be this person who would be like, oh, it's my art, you know, I made it. I would always be, oh, no, I'm just a facilitator, and I'm just a tool, and I'm just giving the community a voice, you know? And then I slowly realized that there's a bit of an ignorance there and a kind of saviorism, you know, you're like a savior going into a deprived community and fixing them. So I think one of the issues that I'm struggling with still is creating art in an ethical and meaningful way, but also being truthful about my position in it, to be, you know, to understand that the experience that I share, they don't represent everybody else's experiences around endometriosis or in general gender health gap. Gendered pain was all about what you hear when you go to the doctor, depending on who you are. So if you're fat, so you should lose weight. If you're young, you're too young to be in pain. If you're old, then you're gonna get your menopause soon, so it's fine. And so there's lots of these narratives around going to the doctor and behaving in a certain way when you go to the doctor, right? So you cannot sound too smart because you're arrogant. You cannot ask for painkillers too quickly, because then what if you're addicted to them, you know? So there's all these factors, and there's lots of that, which is extremely important to consider the female role as a patient. So this one, it's actually still available online, so you can, you know, take a look at some of the wonderful stories of suffering. This one was more about my research, so not necessarily focused on not necessarily focused on endometriosis, but more about blaming girls for not being techy enough, tech savvy enough. So telling girls that they should lift themselves up from digital poverty by going into tech and being incredible programmers. So this one is more related to the topic of my research, which is digital injustice and digital inequalities. So I'm not going to bore you with this one, but it talks about neoliberal feminism, which is this notion that if you try hard enough, you're gonna make it, and forget about systemic injustice because it's on you to be a boss girl and all of that. So this exhibition was about that, and to kind of dismantle these narratives and say, well, you know, it's not just about you, it's about where you come from and who you know or not, if you're disabled or not, if you're, you know, so that kind of things. So it's just like hitting this thing with the keyboard. It was, yeah. But anyway, moving on back to our endometriosis world and gender health gap. This was a kiosk that we used as an exhibition space in Krakow, which was like super close to a church and like a shop where, you know, guys would get beer. And so it was an extremely interesting experience of having a pink gynecological chair, which you cannot see, but essentially this kiosk was turned into a gynecological examination room. And people were sharing lots of stories of medical trauma, in Polish primarily. And yeah, there was lots. And so it was interesting to have community walking around that kiosk and saying, oh, my wife, you know, she experienced that as well. And we went, and it's always like, it always happens with spaces like these. I'm there and I talk about gender health gap and the pain. People come in and they share their stories with me, because everybody has a trauma to share, you know? So this was it. That was the gynecological kiosk. And then earlier this year, this exhibition called End of Violence, which is essentially, yeah, kind of linking to this publication and linking to this exhibition. This was at the Inclusive Gynecology and Sexual Medicine Practice in Charlottenburg. And the doctor there, she's absolutely amazing. She has a gallery space, but she also has the practice. And so we talked about endoviolence in this context of, you know, just you not owning your pain and thinking about the systemic injustices around, like, to get your diagnosis, you know, and how many hoops you need to jump through to be taken seriously by a medical provider. And it was a great event because we had you know, professionals from Charité endometriosis clinic coming in to give a talk. It was about creating a space where we could talk about restorative justice, not just about blaming that it's the doctor's fault or it's the researcher. It was more about like building the community around that. So yeah, I always try to add a little slide just to check if you're all okay. Yeah, no context slide, and then maybe we could like do a little stretch like this. Yes, please. Yeah. And then down. Yeah. Okay, because I used to work at a university, and I would like see students just falling asleep, and I'm like, no, now we're gonna move, you know, which was very ableist of me to get everybody to move. But thank you for doing the stretch. Okay. This is something that I played with AI, and this is actually adenomyosis and endometriosis tissue with teeth in a little, yeah. So AI do amazing things, but this is, you know, part of the condition with just some weirdness. So endoviolence, this is where I'm just going to briefly tell you about the fact that I work for Leeds University, where I work as a researcher, and I do lots of research around digital. And this is my specific project, which focuses on endometriosis as an endoviolence, as a systemic injustice and issue around getting diagnosis and just being in the world with endometriosis. And endoviolence, I talk about endoviolence temporalities. So it is about the experience of endoviolence on a daily basis. So for instance, the way you experience systemic injustice. So for instance, where you're being told that your pain isn't real, or where you're online and looking for a diagnosis, when you are talking to other digital community members about your disability. I'm talking about these type of temporalities, so how you live through endoviolence. And endoviolence itself, yeah, it's like I said, and you also have the explanation over there, so I don't want to go into it, but it is, I see this temporality as a way not only of surviving, because you are surviving, but also about building communities and finding ways to resist endoviolence, to create communities where we can all talk about our experiences and think how to move forward, but in a kind of hopefully meaningful way. So I'm going to be working on this project for the next 2 years, if not more. And I'm really trying to work with endometriosis activists. These are primarily people who are somewhere out there, you know, in the digital world, who sometimes are severely disabled, yet they're doing all the free labor by raising awareness of the condition online and, you know, talking about disinformation, being very proactive, supporting other sufferers if there's no medical support. So I want to look at that labor and honor it and find ways that we can interact, and also kind of look at all these experiences of endoviolence here in the UK and also in Poland. I'm looking at these 3 countries just now to kind of see how these experiences differ and what we can learn from one another, right, about this. So there's going to be workshops, there's going to be interviews, and endoviolence temporarily research, where I'm thinking about how we perceive time as disabled people, because time isn't linear when you're disabled, because you don't go from point A to B and then you rest and you can continue with your plan. You know, as a person with disability and also a neurodivergent person, I perceive, you know, I burn out, and then I have 2 days where I have to recover, and then I work 100% for 3 days, and then so these temporalities and experiences of time are not very in line with the way capitalism works, you know? One of the other thing is the Endoviolence magazine, which I shared with you, and this is where I'm trying to kind of honor art around the world in different forms by bringing it into this publication, and I think there's going to be about 5 publications. There's the open call for the second one. And again, lots of challenges. How do you make it in an ethical way, an inclusive way? How do you not exploit people's submissions where, there's all these ethical issues as well. And finally, I mean, this is going to be fun because medical misogyny, so there's, I'm going to be running workshops with endometriosis communities, and we're going to build a bot, which is going to be kind of using the language of the typical medical misogyny answer. So for instance, have you tried ibuprofen? Or, all of these, some of the titles that are in this exhibition are extremely might be in that bot, but it is going to be informed by the community. So, it's gonna be there, and then we'll see what to do with it next. So this is the End of Violence magazine, and the open call for the second one, which is already closed, but there's going to be more. And this is, another Barbie with the, endometriosis vagina on the beach. And this is a gynecological chair with some bacon. So that's all from me. Thank you so much, and I'm open to questions.
What is your relationship with this LED neon light? This is LED, right? Or something like that. Because you use it. Thank you for the presentation. Many of the works, I will do like a very easy question.
Sounds like a very difficult question, like what is my relationship to the... I have no idea, I just like it. And because I've been operating with yellow and pink, and I want places to feel playful, yet I want them to cover very important topics. And I think these lights help because even with that gynecological kiosk, kids were like kind of running to the kiosk and, mommy, what's that? That's so fun. And then they would arrive and there was like the speculum, hanging, and then there would be like all these stories. So I think it is about, just finding a playful way to deal with very painful topics. And just like, I think I'm just not taking myself very seriously in that regard. I'm not sure if this answers your question, though. Yeah.
Thank you. So, and I just noticed that you use lots of AI-generated images. So, how do you want in the future to combine that with your artwork, or is it just for the presentations, or do you plan to do it some, more arty way in a connection with your existing collages?
Thank you. This is something that I'm already doing, actually, with some of the artworks in my studio. I have printed some of the weird meat, kind of like uterus tissue, and I am implementing it to some of my collages. And I also have to consider the ethics of it and how to acknowledge the contribution of AI, which is also a big part of my research. So it's an interesting process, and I will definitely be playing around with it, but just understanding how to do it in a transparent way, I guess.
I wanted to know if it was difficult for you to showcase something so emotionally connected to yourself, something so private.
Like I said at the beginning of my presentation, my background was primarily grounded in participatory practice. So it was never about me, it was more about social justice and the societal issues. So I would never, open up about what I really feel. But then back in 2017, I had this surgery in Scotland. It was my second surgery for endometriosis. It went quite bad, and I had a really bad infection afterwards. So I was very sick. And this is where, if you are following me on Instagram, then if you scroll down to my like at the very bottom, there are just pictures after my surgery where I'm barely surviving. I was very sick for nearly a year. It was throughout my PhD, which was very stressful and difficult, and I had hardly any support. And I think that's when I started being like, fuck it, I'm just gonna talk about it, because this is real issue and you're helpless, and the community does help you online. And I think this is when I opened up. At first, the account was very private, and then now everybody knows that I sort of talk about my first visit to a gynecologist and how he treated me and all of these things. So in that End of Violence exhibition, which was here in Berlin. I had even like this pink buggy with the uterus on the buggy because that was representative of my of the story of my life, where you're constantly being told to get pregnant to fix yourself. You know, the story of the wandering womb, that if you're not getting pregnant, then your uterus is going to get to your throat. I don't know if you heard of it, but that's this was hysteria. The reason for hysteria was the wandering womb. So that's history, and that's what informs our treatment nowadays. So was it difficult? No, I think it's kind of liberating, and I'm also maybe a little bit naive that I don't realize how personal it is, because when it becomes like a public property, you're just like whatever, you know. So yeah, thank you.
I would like to know about the origin of your artist name, HYSTERA.
So HYSTERA is somewhat related to Greek for uterus, and the history of hysteria, we need a dedicated artist just to that, because the belief that if we cannot find the real reason for women's pain, then that's probably hysteria, you know. And hysteria was a medical condition for so many years. I mean, I think it was only in the 70s that they removed it from the whatever the thing that tells you what the illnesses are. But now very often we just say hormonal. You're just being hormonal, you know. That's what it is. So sometimes people use that instead of hysteria. And also because I've always been sick as a kid and always a bit intense, and very often I would be called hysteryczka in Polish, which is like, you know, you're being hysterical. So hysteryczka was something that was like my label, you know. And now that I'm openly hysterical, I really don't mind. And I think HYSTERA is just, uterus. I have a very big uterus and I need to remove it soon. My surgeon told me that, you know, it needs to be removed very soon. So bye-bye uterus. Okay. Is this too personal? No. I'm happy to, you know, sacrifice my uterus for the purpose of bigger good around gender health gap. So, you know.
Yeah, because I'm kind of interested in the style of artworks you do, because I would like to know a little bit more about the bot project, because I find it really fascinating, because you combine a lot like with the AI and this kind of a new stuff with, I mean, something that is a super old thing.
Prior to going into research even, and if you look at my website, my research website, you can see that I'm also, I set up like this organization called Digital Bees, which was all about digital inclusion and digital literacy. So I have quite a lot of experience in teaching digital media at university, but also in community setting. And so for many years, I used participatory video. You know, I even remember back in Edinburgh, we used these like camcorders with tapes, and we would go around communities, and we would always use digital media to highlight invisible stories. I don't want to be like, sound like a savior here to say that we were trying to change the world, but, you know, so I see the role of digital technologies as a way to create, to dismantle some of the narratives that are out there. And because I am based at the School of Communication and Media, and I'm a digital literacy scholar, and I have been doing digital inclusion work for such a long time, the use of AI is just like a perfect way to just play around. And I guess it's like a part of my adventure. And also, I think it's also last thing, there is the educational element to it as well, where you are creating these workshops. These environments are not just about like, give me your information or give me your stories. I don't want this project to be like this. I want people to have some sort of experiences as well. So this could be like a data literacy workshop where we do talk about the role of AI in your life and in your invisible illness and things like that. So finding a way to create a space where the community can benefit from it as well, by being playful and then co-owning the outcome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.